everyone, I hope you're all doing well, and believe it or not, we are about halfway through the year already, which is kind of scary because it feels like it's going a bit too quickly for my liking. However, because we are about halfway through the year, I wanted to do a video just highlighting some hidden gems that you may have overlooked in the first half of the year that I think should get a lot more love. So let's push aside all of those superhero action blockbusters for 1 second so we can talk about 5 rather small films that I think all of you are going to like in some shape or form. If one of these films is not your cup of tea, then I feel like another one will be. Also, very quickly guys, before we properly get into today's video, I just wanted to remind you that because I recently hit 700 subscribers, I'm going to be doing a Q&A to celebrate that milestone. So in the description is going to be a link to a recent short that I made, and on that short you can comment on it and leave any questions you have for said Q&A if you want to ask me anything for it. So the first one I wanted to recommend to you guys is a very small indie found footage experimental horror film called We're All Going to the World's Fair. I watched this one yesterday and I didn't know much about it going into it. I'd heard a couple people here and there giving it relatively good reviews, so I decided to check it out. And even though it is probably my least favourite of the 5 films I'm going to be talking about in this video, I still wanted to highlight it purely because of how effective it is at being pretty damn creepy. Now, I don't want to say too much about some of the plots for these films because I feel like a few of these films in particular are best experienced not knowing much at all. And We're All Going to the World's Fair is a really good example of that. For instance, I didn't know much going into it, but I came away from it actually appreciating it a lot more. I didn't necessarily love it, but there's a lot to take away in terms of how it is made. And I do think this film actually captures that sense of being online a whole lot more realistically and believably than some other films have tried to be. I think the closest a film has come to capturing realism in terms of the state of being online, the closest we've come to that is probably Searching, starring John Cho. Every other film that tries to attempt it, whether it's Unfriended or Host or any of those sorts of, webcam based films, they're kind of lacking something, whereas We're All Going to the World's Fair tackles it in such a blatantly realistic manner that when the creepy stuff does start happening, it feels like it is actually happening and you're watching something that you're not really meant to be seeing. And in terms of that, I really did appreciate it. Like I said, it's not my favourite of the 5 films I'm going to be talking about, but there is a lot to take away in terms of the craft on display. The next film I wanted to highlight is a film called Duel, starring Karen Gillan and Aaron Paul. Again, this was another one I didn't know much about going into it. I'd heard a few things being said about the film from Sundance back in January, but apart from that, I genuinely didn't know what the plot was about, what type of film it was going to be, and I came away kind of liking it. Although that being said, there is one thing I do need to say about this film that will better help your viewing experience, because if you know this going into it, you'll be able to appreciate it a little bit more. I went into this film thinking it was purely just a drama, and it isn't. Because if anything, this is a hybrid between a drama and a very deadpan / dark comedy. And if you know that going into it, then you'll be able to actually take on board the humour a lot more. Because I thought it was a drama, when the rather morbid, very deadpan delivered comedy started seeping its way into the film, it kind of took me off guard and I didn't know how to react. So I feel as if you know going into it that it is actually a dark comedy, then you will actually be able to kind of appreciate the comedy a lot more. Because if you look at it from that lens, the humour in the film, though it might not be everyone's cup of tea, genuinely kind of worked for me. There are a few lines in this film that genuinely had me laughing quite a bit, purely because of the way they're delivered. There's a line right near the start of the film when Karen Gillan's character is talking to her doctor about this medical condition she has, and the way the doctor delivers a specific line just had me in hysterics because it was just so out of the blue, and it's not the sort of thing you'd expect a doctor in that scenario to say. But yeah, the humour in this film isn't every 5 seconds, but when it is implemented, it does surprisingly work. The other thing that drives this movie as well is the performances. Karen Gillan gives a brilliant lead performance, and I really do want to see her in more leading roles, because with this and Gunpowder Milkshake, I think she has got a promising career ahead of her. I've always liked her since seeing her in Doctor Who and Guardians of the Galaxy. So the fact that she is getting more and more leading roles in these indie films is really good to see, and she is really good in this film, especially when it comes to delivering a very almost blank and deadpan performance that again sometimes leans towards the comedy and sometimes leans towards the emotionless side of things. And for most other films I don't think that performance would work, but you can tell that director Riley Stern was going for a specific approach with this film, and for the most part, it works. Next up, we have probably one of the sweetest and most charming films I've seen all year. It is called Brian and Charles, and it is probably one of the most British films you're going to see all year as well. Now, this is one of those films where I don't mind giving away a little bit of the synopsis, so you kind of know what you're getting yourself in for. The main plot of this one is that a guy called Brian, who lives on his own in a cottage in this small little village in the English countryside, doesn't really do much with his time. He lives on his own, he doesn't really know what to do, he invents these weird little gadgets every now and then. None of them ever work, but the only reason he invents these things is to purely just pass the time. And one day he invents a robot out of a washing machine and a mannequin head along with a load of other parts, and it actually works. It actually comes alive, is a full functioning robot, and it decides to name itself Charles. And from that point on, what proceeds is this really lovely blossoming relationship between this rather sad, lonely individual and a rather excitable robot. And like I said, it is one of the sweetest films I have seen all year. You wouldn't necessarily think it going in, but when you come out of the film, you just can't help but have a smile on your face because it was such a charming, heartwarming experience. It's a little bit quirky, it's rather sweet, and it's just a really endearing film as well that I think will definitely brighten up your day if you're feeling rather down. It's also one of the most British films I've seen in quite some time, and that's coming from someone who's British. So yeah, if you're looking for just a rather charming little movie that will kind of bring a smile to your face, then Brian and Charles is definitely the one for you. The next film I want to highlight is one that I've seen a few people here and there talking about, but overall I do think is going overlooked, and I want to kind of change that because it's a really good film, and not enough people know about it. It's called The Outfit, and it stars Mark Rylance, Zoe Deutsch, Dylan O'Brien and Johnny Flynn, and it's just a really good single location thriller like how they used to make it. If you are someone who has been craving one of those old-fashioned single location crime thrillers that has a brilliant script, brilliant performances, brilliant direction, then The Outfit is made for you. This film pretty much ticked all the boxes I didn't know I needed ticking, and it is just such a good film. The script is so incredibly well written, the dialogue is great, it has a really good sense of tension at just the right points to keep you on edge, but also knowing just the right points at when to let its guard down a little bit. The performances are all absolutely fantastic. Mark Rylance is absolutely incredible, but that kind of goes without saying because it's Mark Rylance. But if his performance wasn't as good as it is, then this film kind of would have fallen apart. But thankfully, he is absolutely fantastic, and the rest of the supporting cast also do a great job of knowing what type of film they're in and adding to that overall feel and the tension that the film gives off. However, two of my favourite aspects of this film are the camera work and the editing. Now, when you're going for a single location crime thriller drama sort of thing, there are kind of two ways you can go about filming that sort of thing. You can either go for the fast and loose approach, which is kind of, here's the rough scenario, we'll go for a lot of handheld camera work and we'll just kind of piece together the tension in the editing room. Or you go for the approach the Outfit has gone for, which is a much more classical approach in terms of filmmaking, and I definitely think it pays off for a film like this, and that is the methodical and efficient mode. And finally, the last film I want to bring to your guys' attention is a very small little Irish film called The Quiet Girl. The story for this one is fairly straightforward. A young girl who is part of a very crowded family always feels like the neglected one in the household, and from the way she is treated by her sisters and her parents, you can kind of understand why. And she never gets to feel like herself. However, when something happens to her at school, she ends up spending the summer with her auntie and uncle, and she basically just ends up feeling more comfortable in her own skin there than she ever did at her house with her family. The Quiet Girl is one of those films where it manages to say so much without not really saying much at all. It's a very simple film in terms of the story and its execution, and to be honest, if it tried to do anything more than that, I feel like it would have kind of lost me. But because it keeps everything fairly basic, I think it works even better because of that. You really do feel for this girl throughout the entire film, and on top of that, from the way the film is shot to the way certain things are unveiled as the film goes on, it all just adds to this growing sense of emotion and drama that you didn't realise was actually kind of sneaking up under the surface, so that when the end of the film happens, it feels a lot more emotionally effective and heart-wrenching because of how the film decided to go about telling the story it wanted to tell. Also, for those of you that are interested in watching this film, just a quick word of warning, it's not in English. Well, okay, there are some parts of the film that are in English, but for the most part, all of the people in this film speak in Gaelic, which is the traditional language they speak in Ireland. So guys, those are 5 hidden gems that I hope you guys can check out at some point. If you have seen any of the films I've mentioned in this video, let me know in the comments what you think of any of them. And also, if there are any hidden gems you think I have missed, then again, also let me know about them in the comments below, because I would love to check them out. If you like the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Bye.